Hey, this is Kristen with Collision Hub, and welcome to Repair University for November. Now, we're carrying on in a series that we started about 2 months ago, Darren?
That's right.
On human resources in the collision repair shop, and I know it's something that we all struggle with. We know we're real good at fixing cars, and we're real good at helping customers, but sometimes we're not all that great at doing what it takes to run our business. And Darren's back for part 2 to talk about one of the most essential parts of human resources in the collision shop, and that's performance management of your employees. Darren, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks. This is an extension of where we started last time.
Right.
This is really talking about what we do with our people once we get them on board, and how do we develop our people, and how do we grow the business itself.
Right, so last time we talked about interviewing, and you can always go back and watch that episode.
Right.
But we talked about interviewing and getting people on right, so now we're going to talk about what we do when we got them here.
That's right. What are we going to do now that we have them? What are we going to do to develop the business in terms of our people, and how do we take them further?
All right.
And today is really an integrated opportunity to talk about not only performance goals and criteria, but what happens beyond the job description. How do we communicate with our employees? How do we develop employees? And then really another phenomenon now, which is identifying high potential employees in the workplace.
That's great.
So in terms of performance goals, you have a number of opportunities with your employees. The biggest challenge you have in the workplace right now is really not communicating, is really not telling your employees what's expected of them, and then how do you measure performance? The biggest challenge or biggest surprise for an employee that you don't want is sitting across the table from them and telling them, by the way, you didn't do your job, and they had no clue what it was.
And I think we struggle with that a lot in this business. I know personally it's something I struggle with. So I've been, touching cars my entire life. We know what we're doing, and then we have this uncanny ability to just think everyone else should know what we know.
I think so.
And then we're frustrated when it doesn't come out the way we want it to come out.
Well, and our owners and operators too. And the challenge is, all of a sudden I need help. So I go interview, I go hire, I use the tools and technologies that are out there, and then I bring someone on board and put them to work. That's what happens. And then I wonder why they're not performing. Or a year from now, they wonder why they didn't get a raise because they are performing. So it's really a double-edged sword. When you're trying to figure out how you can manage your workplace and your time flow and your workflow in the work, you need to understand what your employees are doing, and they need to understand what's expected of them, frankly. In terms of performance goals, I would argue you set performance goals for all of your employees. You define expectations. You help them understand what growth and contributions are in meaningful terms for the employee. You give them evaluation opportunities. The performance appraisal process is only part of performance management. Performance management also includes counseling and coaching employees. That may be a daily opportunity for you to fix what's going on in the workplace immediately. Performance appraisals are a little more annual driven typically, 6 months, 9 months, and so forth down the road. You're looking for an objective basis for the employee. You're trying to determine how they can be rewarded in the workplace beyond the paycheck. You're incentivizing them as well to do a better job. And in the end, if you do that, your employee retention increases and your productivity increases, and by the way, your bottom line increases.
Now let's think about some of the things that you said here about setting goals or setting performance objectives for everybody. So that includes the wash guy,
right,
to the painter, to the technician, to the front office receptionist. And then a little bit about those coaching opportunities, and I know we're going to go into it a little bit more later, but can we just set a boundary line here that just says our industry has changed?
Absolutely.
I know, when I was young and growing up in the shop, the body men and body techs were completely different species, and they showed up and they grumbled. And when they got there in the morning, they grumbled when they left it, but everything got done. But we've kind of had a change in our workforce, and now we've got to think about managing completely differently.
Absolutely. Well, the workforce change, the generational changes that have come about. You talk about Generation X, Generation Y, and the baby boomers that are all in the workplace together right now. Now you have management that have to deal with the differences, the different agendas, the different initiatives. You need to understand what your employees need to make them tick. What gets them up in the morning? What incentivizes them to work harder? What incentivizes them to work better for you and to keep coming back day after day after day? I mean, I would argue the biggest challenge too is, how do I deal with the different workforce now as a manager? How do I continue to deal with them differently yet be consistent in the workplace?
Right.
So I would argue, yes, everyone needs some level of what am I doing and how am I doing it and how do I grow in this business. So there is a baseline, but it's beyond just showing up and clocking in and clocking out, because they have expectations too. And if you don't have expectations to your workforce, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to grow.
Right. I meet a lot of shops lately that tell me kind of, I don't need any of this. Our workflow works. And I always kind of have to go, let's just agree that you're wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
And that you do need these things, and let's go ahead and get your business on track. So
yeah, I think when you take that a step further and you actually define goals for each employee that you have, it's tailored to the job description. We started that process when we started talking about interviewing the last time we were together, and you really need to define where the employees are going. I'm very interested in what's beyond status quo. And you have to be as a business owner today. You have to be thinking ahead of the curve, not only from a staffing perspective, but from a growth perspective. And so when you're defining goals for your employees, they need to be written. They need to be clear. The employee needs to understand, what do you expect for me to go the next mile, not just to do the job. Because in this workplace today, we need to find the best people, we need to develop them, we need to keep them and keep them growing, keep them interested. And it is a challenge, because you really don't know what's inside that employee's head or inside their heart. And we're trying to keep people longer and longer to help grow the business, but you may not know really where their head is and what they want to do. You need to understand in terms of the goals how they're prioritized for an employee. If you give an employee 10 things to do, figure out what's 1 through 10, or tell them they're not mutually exclusive, and tell them that 1 isn't more important than 10, unless it is. My favorite bullet on job descriptions and performance appraisals is that, other duties as assigned bullet. That captures almost everything else, but you have to be consistent in the workforce. You have to understand what they're supposed to do. And the employee and the supervisor need to agree on those goals. They need to both understand, this is what I told you to do, this is what you need to do, and this is how you're doing.
I remember my first job in management, I thought I had finally arrived until I got asked to clean a bathroom. And then I didn't want to clean the bathroom, and the section manager politely showed me the and other duties as assigned line. And I was like, yes, sir. All right.
And it doesn't matter. In this workplace, it doesn't matter. I'll give you an example. You come into the workplace, and you may come in with 20 years experience. And so your level of expectation in the workplace now is, I'm there. I've done it. And in some of our newer ownership groups, that's not the case anymore. You're entering the workplace, but that may not mean you're a senior level player, even with that level of experience. The seniority level is out. Now we're looking for performance. And how do you help move everyone else aboard too? So the challenge too is, I'm setting goals and expectations per person, but I also have team goals. I have expectations for the business and your role in it. So I think it's a bigger challenge for us now as we grow. The other thing about performance goals, they need to be flexible. You need to understand that the business may change. If you bring someone into the workplace and they don't fully understand their role, or their role changes, make sure you communicate that. As I mentioned earlier, communication is one of the biggest challenges the managers have. In addition to managing this ever-changing workforce and ever-changing marketplace, the employees need to understand their goals are potentially a moving target, unfortunately. So, in terms of the actions as it attaches to performance goals, you have to have an action plan as well. You can't simply give an employee a goal and then leave it at that. There needs to be something attached to that, meaning, here's what I expect you to do, here's how I expect you to do it, and here's how we know we got there. And then again, how do we exceed those goals? How does the employee take it further? You don't want the employee in a box.
Right. Would you line out those, we always have achieves, or met, achieves, or did not meet, and then exceeds.
That's right.
So do you line out what it takes to exceed as well as you're lining out what it takes to achieve?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not interested in how do I just do the job anymore. I think we have to be interested in how do I exceed doing the job. Because again, maybe you're looking for someone who can be the next manager, who can be the next production manager, who can be the next owner. Maybe you're looking at multi-units, and maybe you're going to add someone else to this team that is that high performer we're going to talk about later. So it's beyond clocking in and clocking out. Now, does that mean everyone in the shop has the same level of expectations? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What you're looking for are growth opportunities to keep them interested and keep them growing in the business as well. So when you talk about action plans as it relates to goals, these are written, these are defined, these are communicated, and they're communicated often. So the employee understands, this is the expectation of me, and this is how I get there. It's also a dialogue. I mean, sometimes the most important thing about communication is actually doing it, actually sitting down with the employee and understanding we are having a dialogue and it's a two-way street versus coming in, going in, shutting the office door and hoping everyone does their job.
Right.
It's a challenge right now. And it's a big challenge in our industry, as it is with other industries, that managers are expected to do more as managers. They're expected to understand more. They're expected to have a level of psychology, frankly, in how to deal with people.
Right, specifically in the collision repair business, because we have so many different personality types, from the paint booth to the detail guys to the techs to the front office, and then even the insurers and that traffic that comes through. So
that's right.
I almost would like to say a body shop manager is almost like a master of ceremonies at a circus sometimes.
You have to
it's
be.
the busiest job in the business.
You're juggling. You know, and a number of the businesses that we deal with, obviously in the collision repair industry, you have smaller front office management groups. So people are utility players. And so the expectation is, my job is to run the front, my job is to run production, my job is to deal with the DRP programs, my job is to do everything else. Oh, and by the way, I've got payroll this week. And by the way, I should probably do a performance appraisal for Kristen, who's been here for 2 years and never seen it.
Right.
You know, there's an expectation out there now. That's the other piece of the marketplace. Employees are coming in with expectations now. They have a set of feelings that I need to be reviewed 60 days, 90 days, a year from now, and if I'm not doing something right, or I'll leave. What you don't know is, again, what's inside of their head as to why they work here and why they don't, and how long they're going to stay.
Right. I think that's a changing culture too with generations, because there's some people that didn't. No news was good news.
That's right.
So if you weren't hearing from your boss, things were great, and now we have this new trend where people want constant, feedback all the time about their performance and where they're going.
Well, and there's an immediacy of communication now too. The challenge is if you didn't get a review and I did, now we have something that's instant message, or we have texting, or we have email, or we have Facebook. You name it, it will be communicated.
Right.
And if you think that your staff are not talking to each other, you're wrong.
Right.
I mean, all the way down to comparing paychecks. It happens. And we know that. So manage consistently, manage open, honestly, and have a dialogue with your employees. Eliminate surprises. That's what we're trying to do. So when you start with the basis of clear and concise job descriptions and you connect that to an appraisal process, now you have something that's all linear, that people understand this is my job, they understand how I'm going to get there, they have their goals, they have their action plans in front of them, and that the dialogue has happened on a regular basis. That's where we're going. That's the base point of performance management, really.
Right.
And if you don't have that, the challenge is employees don't have a base point to start with. They don't know where they're going, they don't know how they got here, or the negative side of it is they don't understand why they were just terminated. And frankly, the other side of performance management is putting a defensible position for the business. The business is then, I told Kristen this is what you were supposed to do, she didn't do it, we met, she still didn't do it, then I'm in my position where it's documented and I can move forward with a termination.
Right, it's not one of those typical conversations of the yelling match and pushing the toolbox out the back door.
Throwing things, no, the good old days, no. Unfortunately, those still happen, but the challenge, employees are very savvy about the workplace and about employment litigation. And our job really from the HR side is creating an environment where everyone wins, and that includes even in the situation where you have to discipline an employee. So that leads us to the appraisal process. And when you do a performance appraisal, in my opinion, you have a format, you have a template, and the appraisal is essentially written itself because, you started with the job description. Those are the elements that you're loading into the performance management process. Those are the elements that load into the appraisal. The employee understands, remember when I told you what your job was? Those bullets are lined out here. Here are the action plans. Here are the times and dates attached to it.
Right.
Sometimes it comes down to education. Sometimes it comes down to I may have someone in the shop who needs to learn something else or learn more things in the job itself. Let's say it's in the back of the shop. Taking them to classes, making sure those classes are dated and timed, and we did this. Here are the steps to move you forward. And by the way, I'd like to pay you more money for doing this if you can increase your productivity.
Yeah, let's quick question while we're here. We always talk about when it comes to the appraisal process that things need to be measurable and somewhat documented, so to speak. Would you talk about going to classes or whatever?
Right.
And in the old insurance world for me, that was pretty easy. I could measure KPIs. I could do a lot of things that were really, I just sit down and I filled in the blanks, so to speak.
Right.
But when we think about production body shops with technicians and painters, those measurable numbers get a little bit harder to get to.
They do. You can go two different directions. One would be obviously hours, when you can track hours of what's going on in the shop. The other would be something that's a little more subjective, which is the interaction between the other elements of the shop. Hypothetically, you have some situations in the shop where you may have the perfect tech that doesn't deal well with others, or the perfect painter that doesn't deal well with others, let's say. And that doesn't always work in a small environment shop. We have to have a team, we have to work together, and we have to move product. That's what we do. And to do that, we have to communicate. And so for us, it's beyond just flagged hours. It's going beyond the workplace itself. It's adding those together as well as how do I improve my performance moving the ball down the field. That's what we're looking at. So,
Right.
and the appraisal process is documentation and communication. I would argue the challenge that we've had in the workplace so far has been, if an appraisal happens, it's very drive-by. It's very happenstance. I owe you an appraisal. It's 6 months old. Let's go in the conference room. We'll talk it out. Sign here, here, and here. Make a copy and go. That's not the way you need to go, because it's not meaningful for the employee. Some employees could care less. They're out there. I don't really want to talk to my boss.
Show me where to sign.
Exactly. I don't need a copy. Am I still employed? Great. But the exercise we're going through for the sake of performance management is very different than that. It's really building on who this employee is, where they're going, and how I can help them be better.
Right. It's also a great opportunity for that 360 feedback.
Absolutely.
To kind of get an idea of, I think as a manager, we don't know those conversations that are going on in the shop. We like to think we do, but in all honesty, we don't.
We don't.
So sometimes those are great opportunities for that 360 feedback and to kind of learn what's being said in the shop.
I think so. And I think it's all dialogue. If your management style is very top-down, this process doesn't necessarily work very well for you. So you may need something else. I would still argue you document. I would still argue you have dialogue. Maybe you find someone on your staff that handles this for you. Maybe it is a production manager or an assistant general manager or someone. But the environment now is changing so dramatically that the workforce is asking for more. And it goes along the lines of even recognition, which doesn't really come in performance appraisals, other than understanding, Kristen, remember those times you worked extra for me? Remember those times you filled in on your day off when someone was sick? All of those things come into the fabric of who you are as an employee and how that adds to the business itself. That's what we're looking at. And it's as simple as recognizing the abilities that you've shown, the growth opportunities you've shown, and again, initiative. If you're showing the initiative and you want to learn more, you want to be here, you really are great to work with, people understand that and people appreciate that versus hating to go to work.
Right.
And it's very visible. And the management knows it if they're around their staff. Because typically a general manager or an owner or an operator doesn't spend a lot of time in the back of the shop. If they can help it, they're out doing other things. Maybe it's community interaction, maybe it's insurance work, whatever it might be. And so that doesn't put them connecting to their employees on the ground level.
Right.
So that's performance in terms of the appraisal process and understanding that the employees need to know their role in helping the company move forward. It sounds very simplistic, but it's very easy for us to walk through the shop, go to our car and go home as an owner or an operator, versus understanding that guy or that lady may need to understand why they're here and why I wanted them to get that job done today and what that means to not only to me, but the whole shop, that we all win. There's an individual side here, but there's also a very specific team goal. Everyone understands their role. Everyone wins if we all win. It sounds very simplistic, but it's true.
Right.
So, in terms of how you do a performance appraisal, it's very interesting that, again, our owners and operators, our small business owners, typically grew up in whatever industry they're in, right?
Right.
They left the floor, and now I'm the owner.
Right.
Right? And so maybe they've had training, maybe they received a performance appraisal at one point, maybe they got a bad one, and that's what they're using going forward. So I would argue you create a process where we have templates, we've built in a process, everyone knows the role, and then the manager has gone through the work of building a document to have a dialogue. That's what you're trying to do. And you're actually doing it in a way where you go in a private space. It's a process where both parties are involved. It is a two-way street. It's 360, as you mentioned. It is an opportunity for me as a manager to have a dialogue with the employee, but also for the employee to tell me the basis points of what I'm pointing out. This is what you said you would do. This is how we did. Here's the action against it. Where did we fail and why? And it is a top spin exercise. Okay, this is peer coaching as well on an annual basis or a performance appraisal basis.
So when we talk about that private space that we're going to, what's a good time? Time frame? Should it be 30 minutes? Should it be an hour?
I would always block an hour, and I would tell them why. Because some employees dread this, and some managers dread this too. It's not always an easy opportunity, especially if it's going to be negative.
Right.
As we've all, we're around our coworkers more than we're around our families. We're around them 8 to 10 hours a day, every day. We know what's going on. We know what's not going on in the workplace. And so for us, it's really figuring out how do we have the most impactful conversation right now and then use this as an opportunity to improve. If everything you do exceeds, then that's another challenge for a manager, because maybe the goals weren't high enough.
Right.
You know, if every one of the goals are below, that's a different dialogue as well. And that's also a failing on the manager. It's not just an employee. Now, I would argue not every failure of the employee is the manager's fault, but there are elements along the way that you can look at and you can coach, but you need to build a process and you need to stick with it. This is something that you actively do all the time as a manager. Very much like finding new candidates for your staffing pipeline.
Right.
It's the same thing on managing and communicating with your employees.
Right. Now, do you recommend, I can remember back in the day sitting there with all of my, however many adjusters I happened to have at that time, staring at them going, okay, do I save the best for last? Do I save the worst for last?
Yeah.
Do I do 3 today and 4 tomorrow? Do I try to knock them out all in one day?
I would not.
Okay.
And here's why. You asked the question about time frame. I would block an hour. If they want the whole hour, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine. I would also make sure that you're in a private place with a door shut. We're not doing this in a coffee shop somewhere, which some managers do. Mm-hmm. We're not doing it in the lobby or the break room where other employees come and go, because you're trying to lower the barrier. You're trying to create a dialogue versus inhibiting discussion. Honesty, because if I don't know as a manager, then I really don't know what's going on. If I don't know what's going on in your world in the shop, then I don't know what's happening across the board. And I would also make sure that the employee understands, bring with them information, bring their dialogue, bring their documents, whatever it might be. Uh-huh. You told me you wanted me to go to these classes. Here's the documentation. I went to the classes, and here's how I did. Or here's how I improved. Here's the metric you gave me 30 days ago. Here's how I'm doing now. Ask the employee to be an active participant in this process. It's not just top-down. If it is, it doesn't really work as well. The reason why I wouldn't stack appraisals, I wouldn't do 2 or 3 or 4 in a day, because frankly, as a manager, you're not really delivering. You're in a position where it's rote. You might as well just hand it to them and have them walk. There's a very interesting exercise as well on performance appraisals, which has the employee fill out their own. The manager fills out one, the employee fills out their own, and then you compare notes. It's interesting how well the employee does.
Right.
When you gauge how they did or how they didn't do the job. But it's also telling in terms of what they think they're doing and how they're doing it. And I would find it very, very interesting to make sure it happens, and make sure it happens on a regular basis. The other thing is, don't do it on Mondays, don't do it on Fridays, don't do it at the end of the day, the end of the month, the end of the quarter. We all know in the shop the times of day, times of month, and times of quarter to stay away from exercises that aren't adding to the bottom line, purely, like productivity. I would argue this does add to the bottom line, but not to workflow being pushed out the door.
Right, don't call the painter in on Friday morning.
I wouldn't do it twice. And I think that's our challenge. It's making sure I blocked the time and I did it in the right way, and the employee knew that I meant it. It's a positive occurrence. This is a positive activity. Even if there are areas of concern, we work together on how to fix that. Now, you may reach a point where it can't be fixed, okay? Or the employee thinks it can't be fixed, and that's okay. You have the dialogue, and maybe you map out a different plan, and that plan maybe somebody else is going to be doing this in the future, not you, whatever that job was.
Now, when we think about our shop, I've got departments. So I have maybe a paint department, a body department, I may have a parts department, and then I may have, like my office staff. Is there any value into doing, when you're doing these reviews, doing maybe all of the parts department, if I got 3 and I did 1 a day, would I handle parts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever, just so that you're not hopping around the shop, since we know people talk?
I would, because again, they talk. You're absolutely right. And then what you don't want, again, without communication, you don't want a day to go by, 2 days to go by, a week to go by, and I'm wondering why Kristen didn't talk to me. She talked to everyone else in the department today, or yesterday, or the day before. So we don't want any odd feelings. We don't want any misconstrued actions or omissions. We want to make sure that everyone understands you're a valued member of the team. I just did alphabetical, or I did seniority, or whatever the system is, and I talked to people and went through the process, and they understood it. And give them time for feedback. Mm-hmm. I also wouldn't, this is another reason why you don't do 30-minute blocks. 30 minutes is not enough. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get through the process. It's their process too. And so the employee needs to have the benefit or the flexibility to say, I've got questions. How can I be a B-Tech versus what I am today? How can I work my way into production management? Give them the opportunity to know it's okay to ask questions, and I need to know, what do you want to do? You've been here 5 years and you've been doing this. And that's okay if that's what you want, but if you don't want that, tell me. You know, there's a level, and the challenge we have is making sure the employees are comfortable enough that there's no workplace paranoia. You know, which is, why is she asking me that? Does she want me to leave? Because I can leave, you know. So it's a challenge, making sure you have that opportunity, they have the opportunity, and it's a regular occurrence. And
one of the things to keep in mind, I know that it's come back to haunt me in the past, is when you ask an employee what do they want to do, and they tell you, and then they ask you to help them achieve that goal, maybe setting sometimes an unrealistic expectation. So I think in our industry, if a tech comes in and tells me that he wants to be an estimator, do I really have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to let you train with one of the estimators for a day a week or whatever, if we don't have that capability? So I think sometimes when we get ourselves in trouble.
You've got to be realistic. I think you're right. And you're right. I mean, I remember at the very start of my career at an insurance company, the process was modified so that this was in a claim department. And at the claim department, all performance appraisals were done on a March basis. Everything was moved to March. So managers were writing these months in advance, okay? And so they were done. So in theory, how do they know what you did yesterday or the day before the day before? Because there was a line in the sand and this process happened and we all met and it was bang, bang, bang. The interaction didn't happen. It was very top down. Now you fast forward to today, and that's 20 years ago. So now you fast forward to today, different workforce, different communication styles, different expectations of the workers, and hopefully different management tools and processes and trainings that are out there so that they can improve in what they do. So you've gone through the process, you've developed a template, you've developed the tools in the workplace. Everyone understands in the workplace how it works. I'm meeting with the boss, and here's why. It's not a secret. It's not a surprise. What you have to do from there is really think about developing your employees. You've done the groundwork. They understand what to do and how to do it, and you've measured against that. But how do we take it further? This goes along the lines with the action plan idea and the goals and objectives that are out there. There are employee development processes that are out there. There's different training opportunities for your employees, depending on what you want them to do. So your challenge may be, I have a brand new person in the workplace. They're right out of high school, or right out of tech, and they really don't have the skills yet, not only in the workplace, but also in what we do. How do you create a plan for that person? And what does that plan look like versus the other plans you have? It doesn't mean you can walk away from it. You need to have something. In other words, if someone walks in right off the street, they haven't done this before in our shop ever. They've never worked in the industry. What do I want them to do? Are they coming in as an apprentice of some kind? Are they coming in as a helper of some kind or a detail? What are they doing for me, and how do I get them to the next level? Because that's organic growth. And if you can do that, you're really money ahead. You've invested in this person, and they will give it back. And they will stay.
Right. Loyalty return.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you talk about training and follow-up. There are areas and tools that are out there for the positions that you had defined that are job-specific. You may have job-specific training, obviously, for the techs. You may have job-specific training for customer service in terms of how to do what I do better. Maybe it's sales training. Maybe it's closing training. Maybe it's understanding the metrics of our industry. I always argued when you walked in the shop that more people in the shop that work there should understand all the words and acronyms on our industry versus the people on the outside. Meaning, what is severity? And what does that mean to me? Well, it means everything to you. What is cycle time? What is closing ratio? How do these basic terms work in the shop as it relates to every single person in that shop?
And I think that goes along the lines with teamwork. So,
absolutely.
I got a front office manager that's going to be worried about cycle time because that's the pressure he's feeling from the DRP contract that he's working. And I got a technician in the back that's got a different set of priorities and pressures. But if the technician understands what cycle time is and why, it probably eases that burden between the manager going, where's my car, and the tech going, I'll get to it.
Because that's the friction in the shop. I mean, what you're trying to do as a manager, too, is I'm trying to eliminate chaos. I'm trying, as much as I can, I'm trying to eliminate those areas of friction between different departments. And if the departments understand what everyone does and their role in the grand scheme of how this business works, you're money ahead. You've taken the time and energy to make sure they all understand this is why I do what I do, because it makes his job better or her job better. That's where we get. And that's where we're going. So you go through the process not only of job-specific training for the individuals, but you also go through the process of maybe having those people on your staff that are good at some task teaching others. The reason why you would do that is it gives them an opportunity to grow. Maybe you have a really good tech that knows how to do something in the shop better than someone else. Have them teach other people. Maybe it's at lunch. I mean, learn at lunch is huge. It doesn't really take money off the clock. It helps someone grow, and it gives them a chance for stage time if they want it. I found it a huge play because then it's something where it doesn't cost the company money, and you're growing each other together, and the techs are now doing things the same because they're learning from someone. It's very much like the mentoring or apprenticeship type program.
Right. It gives them a buy-in on each other too, where I think sometimes I go into some shops and you can see very defined stalls.
Yep.
And technicians are only worried about what's in their stall.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go into some shops where you really see this cross-flow teamwork and there's a big buy-in, and those shops seem to be producing more and making a greater profit. And so if one tech's teaching another tech, he's not going to buy into that tech.
Well, it's all along the lines of lean. You know, when you think about the lean methodology, it is a team. It is our car, not my car. And that's a different mindset for the body shops. And so when you start thinking that way, then everyone's working together. We're all pulling the oars together, so to speak.
Right.
As opposed to, I did my job, you're the one costing me money on Friday because the car didn't leave.
It's also a great cost saver for, I mean, if I'm working in more of a team environment, that's less body supplies per stall.
That's right. That's right.
That's less dollars on the shelf generally, so there's a lot of value in having those techs work as a team. So.
Well, and you're increased efficiencies, and you're also increasing the opportunity to have utility players. If all of a sudden more people in the shop understand how to do someone else's job, then we are less likely to take a dip if something happens. People get sick, people take vacation, people get hurt, people leave. And you may replace those people at some point with someone who's just not up to par with the one who just left or the one who's down. But maybe I have people in the shop that know how to do other things.
Right.
You know, there's another investment that you can make in your employees, and this goes along with the employee development process, and that is sort of this learn at lunch type program that you can do. This isn't along the performance management side as much as it is investing in your employees, and I would say they're sort of lifestyle training. And what I mean by that is maybe at lunch you have someone come in and talk about finance, teaching people how to balance a checkbook, as an example. Banks will come in and do that all day for you for free. And so that's an opportunity. Health seminars are opportunities. These are all things that are free. They're an investment in your employee, and it adds back into what the culture is of the organization. When we started talking about job descriptions and documentation and so forth, the underlying theme here is who are we as a company? Who are we as an organization? And what's the value that we put on our employees? What am I doing as an owner and an operator to make their life better so that they in turn come back and work harder, work better, work smarter for the organization?
Right.
That's one of those opportunities. And we talked a little bit about, obviously, the apprenticeship side, too. I think any way that you can invest in the employees so that they can give back, you in turn will see that as an owner. So, now, when you go through the process that may be considered coaching or counseling, we talked about performance management, and performance management really is an annualized event or a regular event, a scheduled event. Some companies do it at 6 months. Some companies do it the first 90 days of employment, and other companies will move it further out and just have an annual review, and then every year we talk. Things happen in between the years, right? So you really need to make sure you're still communicating. Counseling is a different animal. Counseling is an opportunity where informally you and I are talking. This is an opportunity where it may be something you're not doing on the job you should be, something you're doing incorrectly, or something that you may need to improve on dramatically today. It's positive reinforcement. It's along the lines of behavior modification. We're trying to figure out how we help you, and it also will help everyone around you. We're documenting this dialogue that we had, and we're putting it in a file. Okay? So it's a little bit different than performance management in terms of an appraisal. This is a counseling opportunity. So there are all those opportunities happen in the workplace on a regular basis. But you need to pay attention. In terms of you've had the dialogue, you've built the process, you've dealt with your people, now you work in something that's called engagement. You need to understand that employees have needs. We talked about the generational differences that are out there. Employees have needs now to be engaged. They want to understand how to collaborate. So we're looking at collaborative management as a tool out there where employees understand, again, this is my role, this is how I can help management. Maybe someday I'll be a manager too. Maybe I'll be an owner or an operator. This business is one of those that really creates ownership from the ground up. We have opportunities to run your own shop, and you know that as well as I do.
Right,
so
into it.
How do we get to the point where I'm building those managers of tomorrow? Again, remember, we're concerned about status quo, but we're more concerned about tomorrow. My interest is, who is that manager of tomorrow, and where are we going, and how are we going to get there, and did I help build that person into it? We've all had good bosses and bad bosses, and I know I certainly have. And some of the better bosses I had, managers I had, were those that really took the time and the energy and the investment to say, here's how you become a manager. Here's how you become a better employee.
There's so much studies out there right now on engagement time. We know within the last 5 years, you've seen corporations shift in what used to be a really heavy KPI-driven performance review to now they're really digging into that engagement, because there's just a ton of research that shows that people will work even for less money as long as the engagement score is high. That's right. Companies like Zappos are proving that over and over, and it really, where we never thought about engagement before, we're now really dialing in on that because there's a lot of benefits to a really high engagement score.
That's right. That's right. Well, and you look at the companies that are succeeding, like the Southwest Airlines. You look at companies like Nordstrom in retail. When you go in and you feel the culture, that is an engaged workforce. That's a collaborative management style where everyone has a piece. Everyone understands their role, and they understand, at the end of the day, I'm wearing the colors of this company, and I need to be able to tell the story. We talked about it last time that employees are your best or your worst salespeople. Your staff are out there. They're at the company functions, or they're at other functions in the community. Someone needs to ask them, what do you do, and how do you do it, and where do you work? Your employees need to be able to answer that, and also be able to tell a little bit more. This is what I do, and this is why I do it. And this is why I love doing what I do. Because then you're building back into it. You're trying to create an effectively delegated workforce, an effectively collaborative workforce, but also an empowered workforce that understands how it all fits together. That's really what you're trying to do. Now, in terms of where it goes from here, I talked about communication a number of times, and you can't go far enough in terms of how employees understand the buy-in process and how you encourage that in the workplace. The old suggestion box from years ago. People still have it. People still are, you may have it as an electronic version now in the workplace, but they're still asking. I always ask for feedback, and I encourage owners and operators to do the same. Ask your staff. This goes beyond the appraisal process. This goes beyond coaching and counseling. Now we're down to the drill down of, by the way, Kristen, if you have a good idea, tell somebody. And maybe we'll incorporate it, and maybe you'll understand how it impacts the workplace. And then if it does work, tell the staff what happened and why. So when you talk about the value of ongoing communication, that's one of those. The other is the environment now is wide open. People feel confident and comfortable in their job, in their skin, in their role. They understand how the business can move forward. All of it starts with basic communication and layering it on. What is my job? How do I do it? Did you tell me what to do and how to do it? Did you tell me how to improve or not? And where do we go from here? That's what ongoing communication means.
All right. Once we're all comfortable, again, having those performance reviews that give me a roadmap to comfort, then you can start watching your business just grow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it's supposed to work. The challenge that we have today really is, again, a mixed workforce in terms of generations, in terms of expectations, in terms of experience, and management that's absolutely tailored the same way. And so you may have managers that grew up on the shop floor that didn't receive the tools or training that they need to manage what's coming at them, as well as having a day job. And the day job is whatever their job might be. We don't have a pure HR manager on staff that does that per shop. Can't afford it, don't need it. But management needs to understand that's their role. All of those people in there are the ones that are really bringing value for the business itself.
So, if we set the baseline at the beginning that just said basically, we know we got to have this. If your shop's not doing it, you need to do it now. If your paint and body equipment supply business isn't doing it, you need to do it now. No matter what business you're in, there has to be some sort of performance review plan. What resources are out there? So for those guys that started on the shop floor that just kind of graduated up the office, and we're so used to our job duty being who's in the front office right now. That's my job duty.
That's right.
Where do we start? What resources do we have?
There are various templates that are certainly available across industries. I would argue that at least what we use are very tailored to the shops themselves. Let's say we're talking about a collision repair facility. Everything is drilled down from job description to pre-populated performance appraisal templates to coaching and counseling forms and formats. All of that is fit together, branded by shop. You can't really go out and just find a document because they're easy to find.
Right.
You really need those tailored to what do we do and how do we do it. how do we take what this person actually does and how do we take that further? And how do we ensure that we're actually doing what we say we're doing? One of the challenges we have right now really is maybe a shop has found templated documents that say painter, and it's the same one they've used for years, but the painters really do different things by shop. Or maybe we have a tech that does something different than the shop down the street, and they brought a really nice form with them, and that's what we're using. I'll give you another example. The example of the appraiser or the estimator. Some shops in the collision repair industry will use an appraiser or an estimator as purely a sheet writer. Very technical, very focused. They write the sheet, they understand the system, that's it.
Here's your supplement rate, here's your,
Perfect. Yeah, and then they're done, right?
Yeah.
Other shops use the estimator or the appraiser as a salesperson as well, closing the deal and interacting with the shop. So that's a different form. That's a different person. That's a different level of expectation. If I come into the job and it's the other form, then we have a problem.
Right.
I'm not doing what you want me to do, and now maybe you need two of me instead of one.
Right.
So there's an inefficiency built in already in that communication's lost, person is misclassified, person's not doing the job they're supposed to, and the owner and operator doesn't really understand why we're not succeeding. If you bring in someone and the job is supposed to be selling, and they're not a salesperson or they don't interact with people very well and you're losing sales, you're going to understand pretty quickly what happened.
All right.
And they may be the best sheet writer in town, but it may not matter.
Now, while we're talking about estimators, it comes up to a good point. I think in my past life, one of the most frustrating things to me was to see a set of KPIs across the board that I had to give to every adjuster.
Right.
Because unfortunately, maybe the adjuster that was working drive-in was going to have a completely different set of statistics than that poor guy that always got the total losses at the impound yard. And that happens a lot in shops. So depending on maybe what DRP contracts I have, that's going to drive the KPIs I have.
Yeah.
But now, as we look for consistency in this performance appraisal process, that's an area of inconsistency.
Absolutely.
And is it okay for a shop to say that each different estimator may have different goals because of who they're servicing?
You have to. You have to. I think if you have a shop that has multiple DRPs, which a number of shops do, obviously, not everyone is alike. Not everyone works alike, and so you have estimators or appraisers or whatever the shop may call them that are attached to a specific line of business. It's not really fair or consistent to use the same benchmark across the line, to your point. So this job is attached to this DRP, and this job is attached to this DRP or multiple, and layer those in. Because there are baselines that you're looking for those employees anyway.
Right.
You know, professionalism and courtesy and so forth. But there are other very technical areas that they need to be proficient at, and you need to be able to measure that. It's interesting. I had employees at one of the stops in my life. I asked them to create job descriptions. This was a company that didn't have them. And a number of them didn't want to do that. And my response was, if you don't do this, I can't measure you to increase your pay. So then they did that. So that's what you do. I mean, that's the easiest way to get there. But I think for you as a new manager, a new owner of an enterprise that doesn't have any of this, you've got to start somewhere. Start with industry background information, connect it to the job, connect it to the business, and then have everyone understand what it means.
Now, if you've had something, I know you can go out on the internet and just Google performance reviews, and there's a ton of companies for $50 will send you a full set of forms.
Wouldn't do it.
If you,
Wouldn't do it.
If you've been a company that's maybe used that in the past, would you recommend maybe just sitting down with a consultant and saying, let's just look at everything I've got and make sure I'm playing on the field I need to be playing on?
For a number of, yes, and for a number of reasons. One would be, let's connect it to the business itself and make sure we're all doing the same thing in the same way. Number two, let's make sure it's compliant, because things change. In employment law, especially, things change. And the marketplace is very different. So we need to understand, let's drill it all the way down to hourly versus salary. That's a huge area right now in employment law. Understanding who should be hourly, who should be salary, is an area of concern in small businesses and medium-sized businesses as well. That's an area where the job description may even dictate the wrong classification. That's a challenge. That will turn into a bigger challenge for an owner and operator down the road. But understanding that if I'm considered a salaried employee, but in reality I'm supposed to be hourly, then that could change my job dramatically. Even closing at night, as an example. How I get paid, how much I get paid, when I get paid. All of these elements are layers that are very specific to our industry to a certain extent. And so I would argue the templates are nice, that's a starting point, but I would really look for some engagement of, here's what the business is, here's what the job is, and here's what they're doing for me and why. Yeah, I think it's a hazard to go out and buy ready-made forms and formulas because they don't really speak to what we do and how we do it, and it changes. There's another area for us to talk about, and that leads us through, you have staff that you think really have potential. You have those people that come in every day and they work really hard, but they really don't want to do more. That's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have some other folks that are out there that maybe consider what are called high potential employees. And a high potential employee is a fairly recent phenomenon across industries that is someone that has it, whatever it is. And there's someone that wants to do more. They have the attributes of urgency. They have a heightened focus in terms of what they want to do and how they do it. They have a sense of intensity and enthusiasm. You see it. You feel it. They're not just doing it for you. You see it across the board. They're out in the shop doing whatever it is they do, and their coworkers are bringing it up. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you. And so this is someone you've identified as, maybe I need to take this person further. Maybe I need to invest more in this person. As a high potential employee, what am I doing to help them to the next level, or risk losing them or burning them out, frankly, because that happens in our workplaces too. So the characteristics of these folks, you may have someone that is extremely proactive. They may come up with those ideas on a regular basis. Kristen, here's a great idea. Why don't we do it this way? They may be new in the workforce, or maybe it just happened. They may have a sense of, how can I do more? How can I adapt to something else? I started as a painter's helper, but I really like what the techs do, Or maybe I'd like to learn how to be an estimator. Sometimes it's driven by money, but sometimes it's driven by something else. It's that something inside of them that says, I would really like to know more. Or someday I'd like to own my own shop, So that's an element for us where you think, I'm building entrepreneurs. And that's what you're trying to do. And you identify it pretty quickly when you see these folks. That's also the benefit of having this long line of communication. You as an owner, an operator or manager are talking to people on a regular basis, knowing what makes them tick, and then you get this sense of, I just wanted you to know I'd really like to learn how to do more. Or someday I'd like to own a shop. And can you help me get there as an owner?
Right.
They're exceptional talent, and they're out there.
And they're amazing to have when you find one. It's amazing what they can do for your business and just your operation, so to speak. You may not keep them long, because some of them are rising stars or shooting stars, so to speak, but I always like the analogy of, Kristen, if you could take 5 laps in a race car at NASCAR, would you do it? Well, yeah. Right. So if you could have somebody, even if you only had them for 5 years, that could really ramp your business up to that speed, would you take it? Right. Yeah, I would. Yeah. So
now, the other challenge is, you have 10 people on staff. Do you want 10 of them? Probably not. Because the challenge is you can't invest the time and the energy. Because remember, these are high energy people, so they're pulling that energy from somewhere, probably you, and probably their coworkers. And so you're trying to figure out how do I harness this energy and focus this energy so that this person grows, they appreciate what's happened for them here. Frankly, if they find an opportunity and they move on to the next place, good for them. You've done something, you've helped build someone. You love for them to stay here forever, but you also don't want to keep a lid on people. And one of the experiences I've related before in different trainings, one of the first managers I had in professional life was a manager who did not want to develop talent. He wanted these people to stay in this unit doing what we did and how we did it day in and day out. And some people were very happy with that. I wasn't. And other people weren't, and so they left, rather than trying to find other avenues to develop their talents. You have to understand what your talent base is, what the skill sets are that are out there, and also the initiative that these folks have. Why do they want to grow? In terms of taking a high potential employee, you've now identified 1 or 2 or 3, let's say. You've found what they do and how they do it and where they want to go. There is a 360-degree feedback process that's built in. There's a templated program that you can build in for high potential employees. That's part of where we're going. So this is separate from performance appraisal. This is a new animal. You've identified 2 people that you want to put on a fast track to something else. So you've developed a program. You have 360 feedback for these folks, and you have an opportunity to communicate in a different level in a different circumstance. This is that person you're developing for tomorrow. Maybe they're the next general manager. Maybe you're going to, again, multi-units. Maybe you want a 3rd store or 4th store, and you don't have anyone internally to grow that from. This may be that person or these people. You're connecting these employees to senior management. You're making sure that these employees understand, I'm a little bit different. I'm growing now, and the owner's investing in me. And this person's taking me further. The owner is now letting me in. I now understand maybe how P&L works, where I didn't before, as an example. I understand how the insurance programs work. I understand how we compensate people and why. I understand flat versus base versus hourly. I understand the metrics of the business. And now I can run a business on my own. You're building in them the early stages of succession planning. That's what you've done. You've identified the right people and you've got them built in. And they're buying it. And they understand where we're going from here. Maybe part of the process of developing a high potential employee is putting them in a mentoring program and giving them the opportunity to mentor others. Giving them some level of balancing on the job versus development versus coaching for other people. Making them a mentee is part of this. They're your mentee.
Right.
But making them a mentor really gives them a chance to give them the willingness to learn, Gene, give them the opportunity to show the abilities they have, to teach others. If they're going to manage others, give them a little taste of that.
Right.
Because they may find out they don't want to do it.
Right. Well, we learn the most when we teach.
I think so.
So
you learn a lot about yourself, too. And the challenge of being on stage is one of those things. And on stage maybe in front of a group, maybe one business unit, to your point. Maybe they're in front of the paint department, and they're just talking to the painters or the techs. Give them a flavor of the balance of the business. Because, again, a lot of our owners and operators walk right from the shop floor into the front.
Right.
And then they're the boss. And that's tough.
Right.
Especially when there's conflict.
If you can cut your teeth doing a presentation to a group of painters, that's way better than trying to do a presentation to a group of insurance managers that have just descended on your office because of some problem.
That's right. Yeah, in the moment.
That's not when you want stage fright.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. I think, again, if you're developing high potential employees, another area is creating the multiple disciplines. Meaning, we talked a little bit about having people learn other people's jobs. High potential employees take that as an opportunity. This is someone who wants to grow. They're curious all the time. And so you're trying to give them a chance to understand. I'll take it back to my insurance days. We did cross-departmental training. You learned accounting, you learned underwriting, you learned HR, you learned claims. You learned all the pieces of the business just enough to understand how it fit together. That's what you would do with this opportunity as well. This is a chance to train them. And maybe you find someone who actually wants to do a different position more so than the one they're in. And maybe they're better at it. The high potential employee may end up in an area where they're not a management person. Maybe they're in a different part of the business itself. So
I think cross-training is so important. I remember in my insurance days I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Started and you cross-trained. And then they stopped doing that about 3 or 4 years after I got employed. That was no longer the way to train. And you could see a visual and a performance difference between the employees that were cross-trained and the ones that were only brought in to do a role.
Absolutely.
Because there was really that sense of, I know how I work within the business as a whole, and there wasn't a lot of arguing between, say, the casualty versus the property versus the...
That's right.
Because we knew we were all in the boat with an oar. So.
Yeah. Well, and you don't... It takes the wonder out of it. You have an opportunity now to understand how the whole business works. It's not us versus them. It's the same thing in the shop. Everyone in the shop needs to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it, but they also need to make sure that you're building a bench of talent behind you. Who is the next you? And who is the next general manager? And who's the next operator? That's what you're doing. You can expand the educational opportunities, too, for these high potential employees. You can take it to a challenge of very class-specific skill sets, or you can take it through soft skills, like communication or presentation skills, or various kinds of sales or customer service skills. Anything you can do to build a better employee, that is an investment in them and an investment in your business. So it's part of the process. Really, what we've talked about is starting at a premise of communication, starting at a premise of clearly defining what people do and how they do it, making sure they have the opportunity to tell you as well. That comes from job descriptions that are clearly defined. Comes from an annualized or regular systematic approach to performance appraisals and performance management. It comes from a counseling and coaching process that is also defined, sometimes formal, sometimes very informal on the floor. And that also comes through finding the right people that you're trying to put on your bus. It's not just people on the bus anymore. As Colin says, it's the right people on the bus. And how do we build our business from that premise, and how do we move it forward? We're very interested in talent, developing talent, and letting that talent push the business forward with us.
And it's so key, and the performance review just plays that vital role in it. That's not only do we all get on the bus, but we all get on the right bus together at the same time.
Right.
And that's what that review lets us do.
That's right.
So it's just a great thing. Darren, if people want to find any more information, where do they go? Where do they find you at?
They can certainly contact me. thefristogroup.com would be one place to find me. You can also contact me by phone. I'm very available. I love the industry. I've been in the industry a long time, and our shop owners and operators are out there, and I know that we can all use the help. And
you're around the country a couple of times a year, traveling around with the Sherwin-Williams A-Coat program, right?
That's right. A+. I'm part of the A+ network as a vendor provider there for the shops. I'm available. I'm also available at trainings around the country, and we do quite a bit of web trainings as well.
So there's some opportunities for folks, not only maybe they just call and talk with you, but they're going to be a chance to find you sometimes on the different coasts.
Any industry event, I'm typically there.
Perfect. So. That's great. Well, I appreciate it. So this is part 2.
This is part 2.
And we're gonna be back with a few more parts of it. What's next on our journey, so we can kind of give people kind of the roadmap of where we're going. So we're communicating.
We are heading toward compliance and termination. So we're heading sort of toward the end of the life cycle, if you will, in terms of how a business gets itself in a defensible position, how a business documents, how a business effectively goes through the process of letting someone go if they have to, and we all do on occasion.
And that's going to be the next one. That'll be kind of the hard talk. So we'll have the hard talk at the next one. So if you want any more information about anything that we've talked today, you can always reach us here on the website, or you can find Darren on his website as well. And we'll be posting some commentary throughout the process as the show keeps going and in the replay. Feel free to send me any questions, and if I can't get the answer, then we'll make sure that Darren gets you the answer. Stay tuned next month for the next episode of Repair University. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Charlie Hutton. Here in my shop, we use the PPG EnviroBase system. We switched to the EnviroBase probably about a year ago. We were using the DBC solvent system, and I'm going to be honest, we were very hesitant in the beginning because everybody's always apprehensive of change. Switching from the solvent-based system to the water-based system has been the greatest thing I've ever done. It was a great move on our part from a business standpoint, and also from the standpoint of we want the best finish that we can possibly provide for our customers. And the colors and the vibrance of the colors that you get with the EnviroBase system, they're so clean and clear. As compared to solvent-based paints that we've used in the past. So for us, converting to the EnviroBase system was a very smooth transition. The blending capabilities of the EnviroBase system is unbelievable. It's uncomparable when it comes to blending a real crazy pearl. And in the street rod industry and with a lot of these custom colors that we play with all the time, it's very crucial. Another great aspect about the EnviroBase system is that no matter how careful you are when we go to reassemble these cars, sometimes things happen. You might get a chip here or there. And the repairability of the EnviroBase system has been unmatched. With the old solvent-based paints, a lot of times on a fresh paint job when you get a chip like that, a lot of times when you're doing that repair, you get a lot of swelling, when you have that blended edge surface. With the EnviroBase being water-based, you have no swelling. There's no solvent in the base coat that when you apply it over the repaired area, it's not burning back into that thin feathered edge. And so that has been a great time saver, and in this industry, time is money. So as much time as we can possibly save, it's a benefit to our business and the company, and it's also a benefit to our customers. So if anybody's thinking of switching from solvent to water, don't hesitate, because I'm a convert and I would do it all over again. I just wish I would have done it sooner.